Recording. Maybe. Alright. 5 seconds in. Intro. Maybe. Damn.
A Wicked Sobriety production. Welcome to the Dirtbag Adventures podcast, an in-depth interview-style podcast about outdoor recreation by Wicked Sobriety Productions, hosted by me, Derek Kern. Listen now for free wherever you get your podcasts. Links in the show notes.
Dirtbag Adventures podcast 002, Connor DeLay. So today's guest, he's an experienced mechanic, a fisherman, a hunter, does a little bit of camping, avid marksman, and all-around open-minded person. I think it's going to be a really good episode. I don't want to waste any time, so we're going to get right into it. What's up, man? How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, man. So Connor and I, we live about an hour or so apart. He lives on one mountain, or across one mountain. I live on the other side. How was the drive in the rain today?
It wasn't too bad. A little foggy coming across Burnt Mountain.
Yeah, Burnt Mountains. Burnt Mountain's always foggy.
Yeah, there's probably about 15, 20-foot visibility.
Yeah, oh yeah, up there, like way up there for sure. So when I was putting some of these notes together, I was trying to figure out where I wanted to start at, and I think I'm gonna do like with the other podcasts. We'll go all the way back and start at your childhood. So how old are you? Where were you born and raised?
Right now, 27, born and raised, and born in Alpharetta, raised in Cumming in Dawsonville my whole life.
Okay. And so you, from what I know, for the years I've known you, you've been more of a fisherman than a hunter. You do hunt, but it seems like you do more fishing than hunting, especially over the last couple of years.
Yeah, when I was a lot younger, I was a lot more into the hunting aspect of everything. It was a lot easier back then to be able to make the time to do it.
Right.
You know, and so because a bunch of hunting stuff, you have to actually set up, know what you're doing, know where you're going, everything, all your ducks in a row. But the last couple of years, I've got a little older, more mature. My schedule is tightened up a lot.
Right.
And so fishing, I can just kind of leave everything in the back of the car.
Yeah.
And, stop 20, 30 minutes and it don't matter.
Yeah. So with that being said, can you remember the first time that you were either taken hunting or fishing, or the first like significant outdoor event that you were introduced to the outdoors? And if you can remember the first time, how old do you think you were, and who do you think introduced you?
I don't know if it's the first time, but the first event that I can actually remember, I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And it was where my great granny used to live in Cherokee County.
Okay.
And she used to live in an old style house up on a hill, and it was a bunch of farmland behind the hill. There was an old barn and probably a 200-acre field. Well, my Uncle Tony would actually go and hunt over there all the time. My dad was over there one time, and I kept always bugging my dad, like, hey, man, can we go? Can I go? And he's like, no, you're too young. And so my Uncle Tony, one day, he was like, come on, man, you ain't too young. You can go with me. And so it was me and him, and we went way on the other side of the field and up this huge, giant ridge in the back. And it was where, like, if a cow passes away or something like that, they'd take them up there.
Okay.
And so they always called it the boneyard.
Oh, interesting.
And so we was sitting up on the hill up there, and I remember it got really, really dark that evening before we ever got up to head out. And he was like messing with me, and he was like, you see that over there? And so I think that was probably the first time I remember
Being introduced.
Yeah.
So 4 or 5 years old. That's about what I imagine. I mean, most people are probably introduced around that age. But it's interesting that it was your uncle, because just in talking with people, most of the time it's like their dad or their grandfather. So I know you do a lot of shooting and stuff with your grandfather now. when you were younger? Did you do a lot of hunting with him, or did he take you fishing a lot or anything like that?
Actually, neither one of my grandpas, neither one of them were into hunting or fishing.
That's interesting because with me, my dad was never interested in it, so I didn't do it. But my grandfather was the one who introduced me because he was big into it.
Yeah.
So you said you hunted more when you were younger. When was the first animal you killed? Can you remember that experience?
The first animal that I killed, if I had to say, it was probably squirrel hunting. Yeah, it was probably squirrel hunting.
What about your first deer? How old do you think you were when you killed your first deer?
Man, the first deer was actually, when I was young, I had shot a lot, but I never found a lot of them.
Yeah.
And so, that was that big learning curve.
Yep.
But I'd say the first deer that I shot and found was probably around 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still a lot younger than what I was. I was 30, so, but I figured it was probably a lot younger for you. And what about fishing? When did you get into fishing? I know your dad does a lot of fishing, right?
Yeah.
Strapper fishing?
Yeah, not necessarily striper. He likes to go and just do bass fishing is what he's big into from the bank. But right. he's not into lures, jigs, nothing like that. He's throw a minnow on with a bobber and let it go out in the water. But fishing, as far as getting into fishing, I think I've always been into fishing, but like I kind of said before, once I started tightening my schedule up and changing this and changing that, I realized I can do a lot more in-depth fishing a lot faster or a lot more frequently than I can hunting.
Right.
And so that was a big thing for me.
Okay. So just a little backstory for the audience from Connor and I. Connor was actually friends with my brothers. It's been probably 15 years.
Longer than that.
Yeah.
Probably closer to that 20-year mark.
So he's actually the same age as my brothers, and he was around hanging out with my brothers a lot 15, 20 years ago. And then as we all got older, we all still kind of hung out. And then I got married and moved away, and then Connor came up. He's got a good job now. He's grown up a lot. And so we've kind of been talking back and forth more recently. And so back in October, my son Thor had a birthday party, and Connor's always invited to the kids' parties and stuff, and he always comes and brings a gift. But you stayed after the party, and you and I sat out here in the front yard 2 or 3 hours or longer.
It was every bit of 3 hours.
And we were just talking, and we weren't really talking about anything specific, but it was just a conversation, no phones involved, no TV. We sat there and we watched the mountains, and we just talked till dark, and then you went home. And that was kind of the catalyst that pushed me into podcasting, because I had thought about podcasting before, but one of my coworkers, he was doing some podcasting. It was taking him months to get his stuff set up. And when he was telling me how long it was taking him, I'm like, man, I don't want to deal with that. Not that taking that long. And so then we were sitting out here, and I'd already been just trying to figure out what I was going to do with YouTube, because I wasn't sure that I wanted to go into YouTube as hard for 2023 as I did in 2022. It's just a lot of work.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
And I was I was still wanting to create content, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And then after we sat out there that day and talked, and we even talked that day, we were like, man, it's nice just to have a conversation like face to face and not have any, devices involved, and like humans are supposed to.
Oh, absolutely.
And that it was kind of the inspiration. After that, I was like, you know what? It is nice to sit down and talk with people. It is nice to sit there and do it face to face, this style,
Oh, absolutely.
And just talk about things. So it was a couple weeks after Thor's birthday party when I really made the decision to get into podcasting. And so I just wanted to tell you that you were part of the inspiration from the talk we had that day of why the podcast has even started. And I made an introductory episode for this podcast, and I kind of touched on it a little bit. So if people have watched that or listened to that, then now me saying this will make sense to the things that I said in that.
Okay.
So I just wanted to put that out there. Just now, when you never did go on a lot of camping trips with me or Nathan like years ago,
No, I never really made it on a bunch of trips, honestly. I was stuck, kind of stuck in what I was doing, caught up all the time. Back then, it was a lot harder for me to make time, to pull off and do stuff like that.
Yeah, you did. You have camped before, though, right? I know we haven't talked a whole lot about it just in passing, but if I know you, I know you've camped.
Oh yeah, I used to go a lot when I was a lot younger. We'd go all the time. Actually, me and Nathan, we went a couple times with Shannon. We went.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that was up. Was that at the lake or was that up at Nimblewell?
Nimblewell.
Nimblewell.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dad always liked to go out to Nimblewell. And so for the audio only people, there's a rifle on the table in front of us here, and I had if you're watching the video, you'll be able to see it on the video format. But I had him bring it, so we're gonna talk a little bit about it and what it is and how we got into it. So do you want to tell everybody what kind of gun it is?
Yeah, it's a CZ 457. It's the MTR. It's the match chamber 22 long rifle, and it's got the bull barrel all the way through. And kind of how I got into it was actually my pop on my mom's side. The last couple of years I've been going up there spending more time with him, and he's always shot 17 HMRs.
Yep.
And so I bought a Savage 17 before I bought this gun. Well, I bought it, and I went up there, and I've got a Burris scope on it and set it up all nice and fancy, done a bunch of bedding work on it as well. But with a 17, the issue with a 17 is there's no quality control in the ammo.
Oh, yeah, so it's all over the place.
Yep, so from one lot number to another lot number, you may have some CCI TNT greens that shoot amazing, and you buy 4 boxes of them from the same lot, and you can shoot for a month and a half, just shooting here and there. But you go back and you go to buy some more, and it's a different lot number. And so
consistency's different.
Yeah, you buy the next lot and they don't shoot. And so I shot that with him for a while. We probably shot the 17s for several months, probably. And then he had an old CZ 452 or 453. Okay. I can't remember which one he had, but it was a 17. And he said that was the best shooting gun he's ever owned. And he shot it enough, he wore the throw to the barrel out.
Wow.
Yeah, oh, he had it for a long time. And so he wore the throw to the barrel out on it. And he was like, and ended up selling it. And he's always kicked himself in the butt because he was like, I should have just bought a new barrel and put on it.
Yeah.
And so me and him got to talking about CZs, and I was like, well, is there any new CZs coming out that you've been looking at or you want to give a shot? He's like, well, they've got a 457 coming out. And so I was looking for months and months, trying to find them. It was back when ammo was hard to find, mm-hmm. Guns were hard to find. You couldn't find anything. And finally, I think it was Hinterland Outdoors, it popped up. I got an alert through Hinterland that it popped up. They had some. So I clicked on over there and checked and kind of trying to figure out how many they had because I was ordering 2. Right. I was ordering one for me, one for him. So I tried to figure out how many they had. I couldn't figure it. It just said low, very, very low stock is all it said.
Probably bought the last 2, huh?
Well, I called them up and I'm like, hey, I'm if I can only get one, I'll place an order for 1, but I want an order for 2. But if I place an order for 2, will it at least give me the 1? And the guy's like, no, it'll cancel your order. And I'm like, well, can you tell me if I place an order for 2, if it's going to go through or not?
Yeah.
And he's like, man, I'm not supposed to say that and this and that. And finally he was like, well, I can tell you this. Don't place an order for 3. And so I clicked right on. I placed my order for 2, and it was 2 weeks later we had them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And How long ago was that? This has been a couple years?
Not a couple years. I've actually had this gun right here for probably, I want to say like 9 months now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought you said you've had it for a while now. But you've been shooting it a lot, right?
Oh yeah, I've probably already ran 5,000 rounds through it.
And what is your average distance that you're shooting with this? Is it like 45 yards or?
When I shoot only with my Papa, we set up at 50.
50.
And we set up at 50. But I actually when I bought my house, I cut in a shooting lane in the edge of the woods, and it goes out to 100. And I've been recently shooting a lot more 7,500 yards with it.
Normal 40 grain ammo, or are you going?
Yeah.
Normal 40 grain?
It's a bunch of the ammo that this gun likes. It likes the Norma TAC fairly well, and it's a lot cheaper than some of the other ammo that I get.
Yeah.
But like the SK Red, the rifle match, it shoots that pretty good. And then there's another SK. It's the SK Long Range, and it shoots it fairly well.
So you were saying that you did some bedding work to it to help with. It helps with accuracy, right?
Yeah. To kind of explain that, I'd have to kind of go back to when I first started shooting the gun. When we first got the guns, I took mine up there, took both the guns up to my Papa's. I let him pick, which one he wanted. He didn't open the box, and the one he has actually has a lot nicer stock than this one. And so I knew I opened them both up because when you get a gun, you have to inspect them to take ownership of them. And so I opened them up, and I seen on his, it's nice wood grain all the way down through, but his had like tiger stripes also.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I knew which one taking them up there was what. And I was like, one of these guns looks a lot nicer than the other one. And I was like, but you can't open the box and look. I was like, it's going to be fair. You get a pick. And at first he picked this gun, and I wanted him to have the nicer gun. Right. And so I was like, are you sure? And I kind of smiling, making him think, good, I'm glad you're taking that one. And then he changed his mind. And
took the other one.
Yeah, which is the one I wanted him to get.
Right.
And so he started opening it up and unboxing it, and he seen the stock, and he started putting it back in the box. He's like, did you see this gun? I was like, yeah, I seen it. I was like, I know what you're about to pull out. And so he pulled it out, and, we ordered scopes and rings and rails, and we got everything set up, and we started shooting. And this is leading back up to the bedding work. We started shooting. When we started shooting, the first probably 400 rounds through the gun, like it was amazing, unbelievable how accurate it was.
Right.
And he was like, I've never had a gun shoot this well, this and that. And we started shooting more and more. But after 400 rounds, 500 rounds, the accuracy started falling off. And we couldn't figure it out. We're like, I understand you need to season a barrel, but we're using the same ammo. We're seasoning the barrel with the same ammo. That's all we've shot was a SK rifle match at that point.
Right.
But the accuracy kept falling off, and we couldn't figure it out. And so in the back of this gun, if you take the receiver and barrel out of the stock, in the back there's a recoil lug.
Okay.
And from the factory, everything's tight as can be. It's never been shot. There's no slop, no play, no nothing. And so the first thing we done when it started losing accuracy is we pulled everything apart and measured how much play was in the recoil lug to allow the receiver to shift front and back in the stock.
Right.
Well, it was moving 1/16 of an inch. And so the first thing we done was we bedded the recoil lug. And once we done that, accuracy picked up again. But once we bedded it on his gun and my gun, we noticed the barrel, in which it's a wood stock, so as they dry, they twist a little or move a little.
Sure.
But on his gun, the barrel was touching the side of the stock, and it's supposed to be free floating from the receiver all the way out. It's not supposed to touch anything. And so we ended up going in his and actually carving out part of the stock and shimming his back and bedded his to where it was centered down through the stock again. But see, we done a bunch of bedding work. I think the big thing on my gun is these guns come I don't know if they're fiberglass or composite or what they are, but they come with factory pillars in the gun. It's supposed to be a factory pillar bedded rifle, and it's supposed to help with accuracy a lot.
Keeps it from moving? Is that the idea?
It's supposed to be a solid form, a platform for it to sit on.
It creates the free floating.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's supposed to keep any play from the receiver itself in the stock. But the issue is like I said, I don't know if they're fiberglass or composite, but they're spongy. And so as you tighten them down and you put in your torque specs and your inch pounds on, it was actually smushing down into the pillars. And when you would smush it down into the pillars, well, then the receiver started touching the actual stock in places. And so it was a big thing me and him went back and forth on was, do we just bed it? Do we leave the pillars alone? Do we drill the pillars out, put new pillars in? And so he didn't want to. He was like, look, I'm not doing it. I'm not drilling my gun out and this and that. I was like, dude, I'll buy another stock. Yeah. I don't care. And so I went and I bought the drill bits, and there was actually a company that made pillars, aluminum pillars just for it.
Okay.
But I didn't want to do it that way. And so I actually went and got some raw stock rod, took it to the local fab shop, and I had them cut it down. I measured everything myself, cut it down, the thickness of the bolts, the opening.
Right.
And I gave them all the measurements. I said, look, I need 2 pillars cut to this. And so mine were cut out of rolled steel.
Oh, wow.
Not aluminum. So I got it back from them, and I got up to my papa's house, and I was like, all right, I'm about to drill this out. He's like, no, don't do it. And so like, I had the gun set up in the vise and everything, and I had the drill and already touching the pillars, and he's like, don't do it, don't. So I drilled right through it, and he was like, you just ruined that stock. I was like, well, I might have, but, you know.
We're going to figure it out.
It was ruined before, you know.
Right.
The pillars are spongy. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. So I drilled them out, set everything up. The pillars I actually epoxied in. I used a 2-part epoxy. But everything else, I actually used glass mat when I actually bedded it in. But the pillars, I was very curious. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I didn't know if it was going to turn out. But once I done that and I put the pillars in, it went back to shooting like it shot that first 400 rounds. Like you can shoot at 50 yards, in which it's got a big scope on it. You can zoom way in. But at 50 yards, you can put 5 rounds, you know, like the end of a Bic pen.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And so it's the same hole now again. And that's how the first 400 rounds, that's how it shot. But as everything started shifting and moving and vibrating and compacting, the accuracy just kept falling off. And so once I pillar bedded mine.
He wanted his.
Oh yeah, he wanted his, but he wouldn't do it. He was like,
ended up doing his too.
So I went back to the fab shop, got 2 more cut and milled out, and then I told him, I was like, just because mine turned out, I can't promise yours is going to turn out. He's like, well, if mine don't turn out, he's like, we'll just swap guns. And so I done his, and his actually turned out fairly well too.
Good.
But yeah, it's this gun itself has been a very big learning experience. I've always been good with guns. I can, you know, set out 100, 150 yards, and I can hit anything I want to hit.
Right.
But I've never been after accuracy. You know, as long as I can hit at 100 yards, 150 yards, if I can hit, you know, like a pickle lid or something like that, I'm good. But with this gun, it's been trying to get, you know, 5 rounds in one single hole.
Like one of the things that I've learned, especially revolving around guns and target shooting specifically, it's like growing up, you're probably the same way, but growing up, you're taught like, oh, if you can throw a dip can out there and you can shoot the bottom of a dip can, that's all you'll ever need.
Oh, yeah.
But then as you get older and you become more mature and you start investing more time in these things, you're like, that was good that we were taught that, but it's not good enough, right? Yeah. It's like even with my 22, it's not a competition or a match grade or nothing, but it was like when I built it, I was like, well, I remember years ago I could shoot through a Coke can, the lid in a Coke can at like 20 yards.
Oh yeah.
And then I start shooting that gun, and I get the scope in right, and I'm like, all those years we were taught to shoot those specific targets the way we were, like, it was part of learning, but at the end of the day, it wasn't right. It wasn't. We should have been. We should be more accurate with our guns, even now, than what we are, because if we had been taught the right way.
Oh yeah.
When we were young. Because I remember going to deer camp, and they would set up a board, and they would put all the skull cans on the board, and they were like, if you can hit that with your BB gun, that's all that matters. That's good enough. But I don't know, man. Like, now that I shoot that 22 at 50 yards, and with that gun, I can put 3 rounds in the size of a quarter at 50 yards.
Oh yeah.
Like, for that gun, pretty good. And I'm like, all right, that's way better than if I was just shooting a dip can. So
yeah, see, I agree with that 100%. The accuracy thing growing up, everyone, if you can hit a dip can at 75, 80 yards, oh, that's all that matters. But you never had someone step back in later in life and be like, hey, look, that was good for back then, but you need to kind of dial it in.
Yeah, it wasn't really for me. It was when I was an ROTC in high school, and they had the part of ROTC where we would go in and shoot guns and stuff. And I actually have my sharpshooter's badge from ROTC. I got that badge, but I wouldn't have got that badge if I hadn't been shown how to properly shoot
exactly
and hold my breath the right way and learn my breath work and how to like plant on a target. If it hadn't have been for that, I wouldn't have got that badge. Because I went into it with some shooting experience, with being able to have a little bit of accuracy, but it wasn't what it should have been from what we were taught.
Oh, exactly. And see, what you're thinking of it was probably called rifle team.
Yeah, I think it might have been rifle team, but I never actually participated on a team. Like, I never traveled with them or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think maybe we did a course for rifle team or something like that, and it, like, so many people out of the class earned badges for it. I think I was going to be on rifle team, but something happened. Maybe it was because I was doing color guard stuff, but I couldn't do both or something. I don't remember specifically. But
well, see, that was a thing when I was in high school, because my high school, the first year of my freshman year was the first year they started an ROTC program.
Yeah.
And so I signed in.
You went to Dawson County High School, right?
Yeah.
Riverview?
Dawson County High.
Oh, Dawson County High. Did they do – it was Army ROTC?
It was the Army, yes.
Okay, yeah.
But, yeah, it was the first year. My freshman year was the first year of the program, and so it was all new. No one knew how to set it up. No one knew how to run it. Both of the instructors were retired military.
Right.
One was a lieutenant colonel. The other was a sergeant first class. But they had never ran a program like that.
Right.
And so it was first year was a very big learning experience, but I'd done it all 4 years of high school.
Yep.
And so we had a rifle team, we had a Raider team, and color guard, and I was big into the Raider team, which is more of a physical competition style level.
Yeah.
But
that's doing like a ropes course?
Oh, it was ropes course, med carries. We'd load a teammate up on a stretcher, and more or less he was carrying them 3 miles, see who was doing it the fastest.
Okay. Well, yeah, we didn't. So I was in Marine Corps ROTC, and the program was in for a while. When I got there, I did it I moved to North about midway of my freshman year, and I did it for 3.5 years. But they didn't have the ropes course and stuff when I went there. Now, when my sister came up behind and she did ROTC and color guard and stuff, they had the ropes course. They had built one, apparently.
Yeah.
So we didn't have that, so that's kind of cool.
Yes. Like I said, our program was so fresh. it was the first year, I actually participated in building all of the obstacle courses,
cool.
the rope courses, everything that they have now. I actually helped build.
Right.
You know, it wasn't just, you know, they hired someone to come in, which granted there was people that came in and, you know, overseen everything that was done. You know, they came in, measured everything, cut all the notches, drilled all the holes. But, you know, a bunch of the actual cadets of the program, we were the ones that were putting it together, bolting it together, you know, and so it was a very learning experience back then, you know, kind of understanding why we're putting it together this way compared to this way, you know, for certain courses or competition style things, if you wanted it a certain way, that's why it had to be put together that way. You couldn't just slap it together anyway. It had to meet certain requirements, and that's why I learned a lot doing that.
So did they have a shooting team?
Oh yeah, they had a rifle team as well.
Was you on the rifle team?
Well, that was the thing, kind of the same as you. I had my sharpshooter's badge. I had all of it, but I wasn't on the team because I was on the Raider team.
Yeah, so too many things going on at one time.
Oh man, well, yeah, that's more or less what it was.
Yeah, because I remember, like I said, we had these little metal traps that were probably as big as this computer here, and they were probably as deep, 12, 13 inches. And I don't remember specifically what guns we were shooting, but I want to say it was something like a .177 caliber pellet rifle, air
That's
rifle.
what it was.
And we would set these little metal trays up, and they built a new gym, so ROTC took over the old gym, and we would set them up in the gym. So it was like probably 50, 60-yard shots what we were making in there, and they kept trying to get me to be on the rifle team, but I don't remember. I think it might have been color guard that I was doing that I couldn't participate because it was like color guard was having to be at the school for the football field for the football games because we were walking the flags out, and then rifle teams like over in Alabama at some school participating in a shooting competition. But that's pretty interesting. You ever go back and like now that you're older, you ever go back to the school and watch any of the like changing of the guard ceremonies or the promotion ceremonies?
I've actually went back. It wasn't specifically just for that, but I have went back to the school probably 5 or 6 times now. But a bunch of like the instructors that were in whenever I was there, they're not there anymore.
Right.
And so they've retired, moved on, which, they were, one of them was a lot older in age. The other one could have probably stuck it out a couple more years. But I think they clicked so well together that when the lieutenant colonel left, sergeant, he was like, well,
time for me to go too.
Yeah, so he dipped out too.
We've gone back a couple times. Amanda's grandpa was a drill instructor, Marine Corps for 25 years. And he wanted to go. I think we took him to North, and we did one of the promotion ceremonies and watched it. They do it on the Marine Corps birthday, which is usually in November. It's like November 8th or something, I think. I don't remember right off. I'm sure somebody will correct me, but we've gone back since I've been out of high school probably, I think maybe 4 times I've went back and watched it. It's not the same that I remember it. I mean, it is to an extent, and I've guessed they've had to change their standards with everything going on in the world nowadays. But like, I remember when I was doing those promotion ceremonies, like you would pass out and hit the deck, and that was it. That's where you laid. And nowadays they got guys that run around, and when they lock their legs and pass out, they'll catch you so you don't hit the deck.
Yeah.
But I'm like, come on, man, you gotta let them lay there and be embarrassed when they wake up. Teach them not to lock their legs anymore.
Oh yeah, man! I can't tell you how many times we'd be in formation, lined up, and just standing there, and you see someone start wobbling.
Yeah.
They start wobbling. You're like, you can't say nothing, you can't do nothing. All you can do is watch.
Yep.
And it's usually once they start wobbling, it's like 20 seconds. They're on the floor.
They always do the ceremony in November. They do it on the football field, so it's not a huge deal. But during the summer, we would go, and they would have us drilling around the parking lot. and they would have us standing at parade rest or in formation in the parking lot. And I've seen guys hit the asphalt and have blood and busted lips and stuff where they've smacked the asphalt. It's pretty intense. But they don't let them do that anymore. I don't think from the way I understand it, I haven't been in a few years, but now ROTC basically is a joke from some of the people I've talked to that still are in that realm of things.
Yeah, see, I've heard the same thing about the program I used to be in. You know, whenever I was in it first starting up, you know, like I said, it was brand new. And that both of the instructors were fresh out of the military. And so it wasn't no, you know, kidding around, joking.
Yeah,
this
they were
and
getting
that.
serious.
It was serious. And so from what I've heard now with the new instructors that are in, you know, it's kind of like what you said. It's turned into a joke. It's not, I mean, you learn all of the things that I learned, but you didn't learn it the way I learned it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, you know, no disrespect to the military nowadays, because, you know, there's guys over there doing things that we're not doing.
Oh, absolutely.
But the military itself has kind of turned into a shit show when they started allowing, you know, I don't know, they started allowing things that probably they shouldn't have allowed.
Yeah.
I don't know what I really want to say, because this is only podcast number 1. I don't want to get kicked off already.
Yeah, no, I get that. I could kind of tell, just kind of looking at you, I was like, I wonder where he's going to go with this.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't want to get kicked out already, but, you know, I have a lot of respect for those guys that are over there doing that stuff now. That some of these guys are lifers, you know, they've been in there for 20 years. They're on deployment number 8. Over there in the sandbox fighting for our country. They come back, and then they've got to deal with this new shit that the military is implementing over here. And I just read an article a day or two ago about why Marines are only doing 4 years now, because you come into the military with the expectation that you're going to go and you're going to fight for your country, and you go into the military and it's something completely different. They don't even teach you combat tactics anymore unless you go for that specific MOS, which is ridiculous.
Yep.
So then you got guys that are coming back that's been over there for, 15 years, 8 deployments. They've seen all kinds of things that people really shouldn't see. And then they come back and then they have to come back to what the military is now. And they're like, screw that, I'm not doing that. And then they have to figure out a way to transition out of being a killer into being a civilian again. And that's when we start having all these, PTSD problems and stuff like this. And there's no help for them either. I mean, the military doesn't care. The military doesn't, I think they offer them a counselor, but it's only like a 1 or 2 time deal. They're not allowed to.
Yeah, and see, and that's a big thing too, the transition back to civilian life. They come back and I know guys that have been over, served, and has come back that have issues, that have PTSD.
Oh, serious issues.
Yeah, but kind of like you said, once you're out and your contract is up, the military don't really care that much.
Mm-mm.
And
well, that's why a lot of guys they work for these 3-letter agencies, FBI, CIA, because the military is like, whatever, you're on your own. Well, all they know is war. Yeah. So the CIA is going to absolutely send them back over as independent contractors.
Oh, yeah.
And then now they're doing, I don't think they call it deployments when they go and work for the CIA and stuff. I want to say they call them like, I don't remember right off, but I was listening to this one guy talk, and he was saying he was on like his 200th trip with the CIA as an independent contractor on top of his 8 years of being deployed in Afghanistan fighting. What's he going to do when he comes back? He's not going to be able to transition.
That's the thing. Once you're in that far and it becomes a lifestyle, especially to that extent, when you do come back and you do try to readjust and to turn that off, in a way, you almost can't do it. And the military, like we said, they don't really care once that contract's up. And so they come back and they try to adjust, try to figure these things out. And to try to get help to an extent, it's there. But the process and the hoops you have to jump through to be able to get to that end goal, to get that help. They've made it so hard now and so complicated that, your average person coming back that is going through all these things, they don't have the mindset to figure that out.
No, and it takes a lot to get them back into a right mindset. I mean,
and so I really think that, it should be handled a lot differently than it is. If you're having issues or something's going on, it should be to an extent of that's all you should have to say.
Yeah, I mean, they spend average soldier, I think, is like $10 or $11 million in training to turn them into killers. Yeah. But then they don't want to put any money into the killer to ease his mind.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't want to put no money in.
No, it's like I said, once that contract,
it's like you're a lost asset. From the time they say, okay, you're going to be a SEAL, and we're going to spend $11 million on training you how to kill a person 100 different ways. We're expecting you to die. We're not expecting you to come back because that's what we're training you to do. And so when they do end up coming back, it's like, well, we weren't expecting you to come back, whatever.
Yeah, what do we do with you now?
Yeah. Oh, man. So kind of going back to what we were originally talking about, are you shooting this like every weekend? Are you or at least once a week, maybe?
Well, see, whenever the weather was nice, it was probably 3 or 4 times a week.
Okay.
But toward the end of the year in Georgia, it really becomes the rainy season, kind of to say. And not only that, the cold snap and shooting a gun like this for accuracy that I'm trying to get out of this gun,
can't really do with a cold barrel.
No, and the first 2 shots of this gun, your first shot's way off. Your second shot's a little closer. And after that, it'll start stacking them.
Okay.
But see,
once the barrel gets warm.
Once the barrel's warm, but you should go out and try to shoot in really cold weather. If you shoot back to back to back, it's fine because the barrel's staying warm.
Okay.
But if you take a 5-minute break in the winter, well, it's going to throw it off again.
Gotcha.
Until the barrel warms back up.
That's interesting. I never thought about that aspect.
Oh, yeah. The outside temperature and how fast that barrel cools plays a very big deal in how much accuracy you can pull out of it.
Interesting.
But during the summer, it's not that bad. During the summer, you can actually take this gun, set it outside in the sun. You don't really even need a warm-up shot.
Yeah.
Like, as of now, you might need 2 in the summer. Your first shot may just be barely off once it's sat out in the sun. It's warmed up. Mm-hmm.
So you were shooting it 2 or 3 times a week in the summer, and then kind of once we start dropping off into fall, probably slacks off a little bit.
Yeah. I think once the outside temperature, probably around 30s, starts to have an effect on the barrel and how long you let it sit. And so, even during the fall time, I was shooting like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, even like now with it 50 degrees outside.
Oh, yeah.
The last few days. Well, besides the rain, but I mean, that's interesting. So, we're going to kind of get off the gun topic for a minute. We're going to go back. I wanted to ask you, what is the biggest, like you said, your first deer you killed when you was 14. And I know that back when you were hunting and you and your brother and your dad, y'all hunt a lot for meat. That's a lot of what you ate growing up, right? You had
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Deer meat in the freezer all the time. So you weren't ever really a trophy hunter, but what is the biggest buck you've killed?
Killed and found probably 7 points.
7 points?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, see, like I said, when I was young.
Yeah, I mean, we all did, right?
Yeah, I shot some that I never found, but granted, a bunch of those were, landowner deals.
Right.
Once they cross property lines.
Can't get them.
Yeah, which they made it a couple years back to where you didn't have to ask the landowner, but there was an issue where someone was shot, cross property lines, he was shot, killed, and so they changed it back now again to where you have to ask.
Yeah, I went down a huge rabbit hole about this stuff, and especially it's bad here, but like out west, man, it gets nuts out there. Like there's places that are, squares of public land that are surrounded by private land, and you can't get to them. So there's like a huge debate out there, a huge fight going on. Like, well, and the most recent one I was listening to was Meat Eater, and he was talking about a lot of guys will corner step. So they step from one piece of property, one piece of public property onto another piece of public property, and the four corners of the property are all private. So you're stepping over somebody's private property. You might not ever even touch it. But the debate is like, is that considered trespassing?
Yeah.
Like if you're 10 miles into the wilderness and you're looking at Onyx and your grid shows, okay, well, private, that's public. I can corner step over onto it, never touch it. Is that like, what's the morale there, right? Like, is that, you're 10 miles, nobody's going to see you. You're not stepping on the land, technically.
You're not hunting their land.
You're not hunting their land. You're just stepping over it. But it's like a real big thing out west. Like, it's insane, some of the stuff I was reading on that.
Yeah, so more or less the public land is gridlocked by private land.
Yeah, and you know, there are some places like that here. Just recently, I went and hiked up, not Rich Mountain. It was Owltown Mountain. And so Owltown Mountain is really strange because Owltown Mountain is not the biggest mountain in that WMA, but it is one of the taller ones. It's in Rich Mountain WMA. And when you're looking at the map, the whole mountain is in WMA, but there's a small section at the very summit that's outlined that's Cherokee National Forest. So then now what happens is when you cross from that WMA onto that national forest, laws and regulations change on what you can do hunting wise.
Yep.
And that square on top of that mountain might only be 200 square yards or whatever it is. It's not very big, but it's like, why? Why is that top of that mountain national forest and the rest of it WMA? Because now what you're doing is you're making someone hike through that WMA to get to that piece of national forest land where the rules are different. So like, you might not be able to hunt deer in the WMA right now, or you might not be able to hunt deer on national forest right now, but you can in WMA.
Yep.
So it's like, how many people are getting tripped up by that?
Yeah, the lines are skewed.
Yeah, and there's another place up in the mountains that I've been looking at. There's no way to get to it. It's a square piece of national forest land that is completely landlocked by private property. So you'd literally have to go knock on somebody's door until you find the property owner. Or I guess now there's Onyx, so you could go on and you could find the property owner and call or go knock on the door and say, hey, I need to get to that public land that's on your, like, I got to go through your private property to get there. 90% of the time they're going to tell you no.
I'd say is probably higher than 90%.
Yeah, I mean, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
When you and I were younger, you used to be able to get permission pretty easily.
Oh, yeah.
But like even living here in Jasper or even like you over in Dahlonega, a lot of the old timers aren't putting up with this shit anymore because people come on and they trash their property and won't clean up after themselves. So they've just basically said, no one's coming on. I don't care. You can't even fish. Even like I see it a lot with ponds, like a farm pond.
Yeah.
Growing up, we'd fish farm ponds, right? You catch some of the biggest fish you ever caught in your life in a farm pond. And these old farmers would allow you if you picked up your stuff.
Yeah.
And then it was like, as we got older and older, we didn't really fish those ponds that much anymore, but you would drive by these areas and you would see them just completely trashed. And then it was like a year or two later, you drive by, it's grown up. There's fences and no trespassing signs and, signs saying, hey, if I catch you on my land, I'm going to shoot you. Cameras are present. And it's all because people won't clean up after themselves.
Oh, yeah. I can't tell you how many private ponds that I used to be able to fish that I can't fish anymore.
And that's the thing, man, is like a lot of us had permission to fish those things. And we did what we were supposed to do. But because of some Yahooligans, now nobody can do it. And even if the farmer still knows you, he'd be like, well, it's only fair that I close it to everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Like I can't let you fish here and not let them. And it's like, what do you say to that? Okay, I mean, I get it, but that's some bullshit is what it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like I said, man, I can, off the top of my head, I could take you to 8 different private ponds that I used to be able to fish. And I actually knew the landowners. You know, when I would go in, I'd take, you know, a little bag in with me, and I'd be cleaning up other people's trash.
Yep.
Like if I'm walking around the bank of the pond and there's, you know, a night crawler bucket over there, or chicken liver bucket, you know, I'm picking it up, putting it in a bag, I'm taking it out with me.
Yeah.
And they would see me doing that, and they know, like, hey, it's not this guy that's trashing it out.